I lied. I told you this would come out on the 23rd, and today's the 24th. Sorry, Charlie, but I couldn't get it together. But it's here now, so yay. Hello, everyone. My name is Stuart Teicher, and I am the host of the Good Lawyers Gone Bad podcast, the first true crime podcast where the criminals are lawyers. I'm a continuing legal education speaker by day. I teach ethics CLE to lawyers. You can find my information about my speaking content at stuartteicher.com. And I am a podcaster by night. Now, if you noticed, I put some ads in the podcast now. Now I'm a real podcast. I'm a real boy. I want to apologize to some of you, though. If you listened to the Swindler's Swan Song episode and an ad came at a super weird place, that's because I was learning how to use the software and I screwed up. I fixed it, but I'm sorry if that messed up the flow of the episode when you were listening. Today's episode is called Commando's Collapse, the Betrayal of Marco Martinez. Now, there's two things for you to know before I get into the story. First of all, I made up the names. There are a couple of reasons that I did that. Some names didn't exist. When I did the research, some people were called like victim number 1 and victim number 2. And there were a couple of other reasons that don't really matter. I just thought it would be better to change some of the names for this episode. The second thing is there is some cursing in this episode. But let's face it, I'm from New Jersey, and we should all be quite surprised that it took this many episodes before I actually dropped an F-bomb. Don't forget to like and subscribe on the podcast platform of choice, however you listen to the Good Lawyers Gone Bad podcast. Ratings and comments really help as well, so please throw them our way. Enjoy this program, The Commando's Collapse. It's October 26, 2019. A staff sergeant of the 75th Ranger Regiment crouches in the back of a Black Hawk helicopter. Have you ever heard the sound that's made by the rotor blades from a military helicopter? They don't whir like a commercial chopper. When you hear a traffic chopper or a police helicopter overhead, you hear the blades moving and you think, oh, there's a helicopter overhead. But the blades on a military chopper give out a deep thud that you feel in your bones. When you hear them, you think, trouble is coming. That night, the Black Hawk was flying through airspace in the Middle East, and it wasn't just carrying the staff sergeant. It was carrying an entire squad of commandos from the 75th Ranger Regiment. The 75th Ranger Regiment isn't just any unit. They're the Army's razor-sharp edge, forged for the missions that only a select few can handle. These Rangers are the ones you call to storm enemy strongholds, snatch high-value targets, or dismantle terror cells in the dead of night. They're relentless, disciplined, and they live by a simple creed. Rangers lead the way. And in October 2019, they were called on to do just that. The group's destination was the Idlib province in Syria, and they were going after the most hunted man in the world, Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Al-Baghdadi was the shadowy overlord of ISIS, a man who turned a twisted vision into a global reign of terror. Born in Iraq in 1971, he morphed from a quiet scholar into a brutal warlord, orchestrating beheadings, enslavements, and attacks that bloodied cities from Paris to Mosul. By 2019, with a $25 million price on his head, he was a ghost, slipping through Syria's war-torn shadows. But U.S. intelligence, well, they finally located him in a dusty compound in Barisha, Syria. Imagine how that raid could have gone. The sergeant's weapon is locked and loaded, his night vision goggles painting the world in ghostly green. The mission of the 75th Ranger Regiment was to secure the perimeter of al-Baghdadi's compound while members of the elite Delta Force stormed the heart of it. The sergeant's squad touches down in a whirlwind of dust, and they fan out around a battered concrete house. Through his night vision goggles, the sergeant spots 2 armed guards by a gate. After a signal to his teammate and 2 suppressed shots, they're dropped silently. But the calm shatters as the Delta Force breaches the main door with a charge. Gunfire erupts. Wild AK bursts come from inside. The sergeant takes cover behind a crumbling wall, laying down precise bursts of gunfire to keep threats at bay. Over his communication device, he hears what's happening. Delta Force is closing in, and that is when the famous confrontation occurs. It's a confrontation that was being watched by the President of the United States back in the Situation Room in Washington, D.C. as it happened. As the Delta Force pushed ahead, al-Baghdadi was chased underground, and eventually he found himself trapped in a dead-end tunnel. But he was not alone in that tunnel. Baghdadi was cowering behind his children, who he was holding as human shields. And he was wearing a suicide vest. Above ground, the sergeant both heard and felt the end of the chase. A muffled explosion ripped through the ground, rattling his boots. Al-Baghdadi didn't want to be captured by American soldiers, so he detonated his suicide vest, killing himself along with his 3 children. The raid would forever be known as Operation Kayla Muller, named after an American hostage killed by ISIS, and it was exactly the sort of thing that the 75th Ranger Regiment was called on to perform. And while a soldier named Marco Martinez didn't participate in this particular operation, he surely participated in many more just like it. Marco was a member of the 75th Ranger Regiment, and he was, shall we say, an experienced warrior. Marco Martinez was a soldier built for the shadows. Trained to a lethal edge through years of grueling military instruction, his expertise ran deep. The 75th would be trained in small unit tactics, urban combat, and precise marksmanship. Marco himself was a trained sniper. All of this was honed during multiple overseas deployments. In fact, Marco did 3 combat tours in Afghanistan, a place where he, as a member of the elite 75th Ranger Regiment, was surely involved in operations similar both in scope and style to the one that got Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Rangers don't only receive high physical training, they receive high-level clearances as well. Their missions involve sensitive intelligence like real-time surveillance or classified targeting data. For that reason, Marco Martinez held a top-secret, sensitive compartmented information security clearance. That's known as a top-secret SCI clearance. A top-secret clearance is the highest of the 3 main levels of U.S. security clearances. Martinez would have been able to obtain intelligence reports, military operation plans, or sensitive diplomatic communications. Having the additional SCI designation to his clearance meant that he was privy to highly sensitive information within the top-secret level, like satellite imagery, intercepted communications, or covert operation details. Over the years, Marco's consistent dedication to the stressful craft of being an elite soldier surely weighed on his psyche. How could it not? It was years of being exposed to constant danger and physical exhaustion. He was consistently required to make split-second life-and-death decisions under circumstances of immense stress. And then throw in the human suffering that one sees on the battlefield. Soldiers who were forced to watch a savage like al-Baghdadi blow himself up and take 3 innocent children with him, that creates a deep emotional wound. And those wounds can lay dormant, bubbling to the surface much later when they're activated by something that normally has nothing to do with the combat itself. All of that pressure must have been what prompted Marco Martinez to leave the Rangers and transfer to the 82nd Airborne. Maybe he thought that jumping out of airplanes would make him happy. It's tough to know if it worked, because a few years later, Marco left the service. I travel a lot for work. I'm in airports all the time, and I've noticed something after many years of air travel. Some people are just jerks. Now, I can pretty much take everybody, even the jerks. You know, it is what it is. I just learned to roll with the punches. But there's one particular type of person in the travel world that needs to stop doing what they're doing. Stop standing up in the middle of the aisle as soon as the plane gets to the gate, grabbing your bag from the overhead compartment, and then sliding up the aisle to get closer to the door like nobody can see what you're trying to do. Every functioning human knows that you deplane by rows. You wait until the people in front of you get up, and then you get up. It's simple, and the entire civilized world knows how it works. But a truckload of people just disregard this basic rule of society when they get on a plane. Listen to me. You don't enter Jumanji when the aircraft door closes. The laws of the jungle don't apply when you're on a plane. These people hear that ding and they pop up like a jack-in-the-box. It's like a starter pistol went off in a race. They immediately jump to their feet, grab their bags, and then they stand in the aisle for 20 minutes. They're 20 minutes waiting. And you know what they're doing for that 20 minutes? They're standing up and they're breathing on the rest of us. Yeah. They're just standing there, panting, holding their bags, sweating, and just breathing down on those of us who are sitting politely. Stay in your seat. When it comes your time to get up, grab your bag as you're walking out, and leave. Now, there's, of course, one caveat. If you have a tight connection, you absolutely can jump up and run to the front. But as you're doing that, you need to say, I got a tight connection, excuse me, tight connection, excuse me. And for the rest of us who don't have a tight connection, if you hear someone say that, let them go. There's no reason to cause someone to miss their connecting flight to Lisbon because you want to get to your Uber 30 seconds quicker. That is the only type of person who gets under my skin, for real. Everybody else, I just let it go. You know why? It's my coping mechanism. The only way I can tolerate air travel is by letting the jerks be jerks and just ignoring it and moving on with my life. So if you see me at an airport, you're likely going to find me just, listening to music on my headphones and chilling. And if you were to take off my headphones and give a listen to that music, you would probably be surprised to learn that there is a very, 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 very high probability that I am listening to Ariana Grande. I love Ariana Grande. Her pop albums are outstanding. They are the best example of pop music as artwork. And my favorite song is actually one that I talk about in my legal ethics seminars all the time. It's called Bad Decisions. Have you ever heard it? It's on her Dangerous Woman album. It is her best song of all time. I talk about that song and that idea in my CLE programs because there's something about bad decisions that, it's not just about lawyers. I think we can all appreciate it. Far too often in life, we can tie our misery back to one bad decision. Something that we did in the heat of the moment, something that we did out of anger or desperation. Whatever the motivation, there's usually something that we can look at and say, if I just would have done this thing differently right here, I could have avoided a lot of heartache. In Marco Martinez's life, he actually made two bad decisions. The first one was a bad decision that he didn't realize would be so devastating, so I almost don't count it. But the second one, he knew exactly what he was doing. And that decision would send him into a tailspin that he'd never recover from. Let's talk about that first decision. The year Marco Martinez left the service should have been a banner year. On the surface, things seemed to be moving in the right direction. Marco became a member of the National Guard, which meant that he was able to retain his connection to the military, something that was an important part of his life. And his personal life was moving in the right direction, too. Marco recently met a woman. Marco started to date a woman named Sue Hayes. Sue was a nurse, and she and Marco seemed to have started a romantic relationship shortly after he left the Army. But Sue didn't know that Marco was wrestling with some silent demons. Throughout 2016, embers deep inside Marco Martinez were starting to smoke, and he was about to add some dry kindling to that budding fire. Marco made his first bad decision, and it was a decision that he didn't know would be a mistake. Marco decided to go to law school. It sounds like I'm just joking, like I'm being facetious, but I'm not. Think about it. Law school is super stressful. Late nights buried in case law, the pressure of exams that could make or break your future, intense competition, and a price tag. I mean, thousands and thousands of dollars of debt a year, and it adds up fast. There's also an unexpected sense of isolation. Law school is a surprisingly lonely endeavor, and I don't think a lot of people expect that. And Marco Martinez wasn't just any law student. He wasn't even just any former soldier-turned-law student. For most veterans, the decision to go to law school after leaving the military isn't so monumental, and it's not unusually dangerous in any way. But that might not have been the case for an elite ranger like Marco. Think about how it might have felt for him. Marco was a battle-tested commando with a top-secret clearance. Leaving the Army wasn't just a career shift for him. It must have felt like he was losing a piece of his soul. As a Ranger, he had purpose. He was surrounded by brothers in arms, and they all shared a clear mission. On top of all that, it seems like Marco didn't even want to really leave the Army. After all, he moved from the Ranger unit to Airborne. It was almost like he was trying to find a way to stay. But he didn't stay. And in 2016, that life of adrenaline-fueled soldiering was replaced by the part-time rhythm of the National Guard. Weekend drills, less action, less connection. And add to that the weight of combat trauma, the kind that lingers from years on the field, and Marco was probably left wrestling with ghosts that he couldn't outrun. And what he didn't know is that he was sitting in the middle of a breeding ground for alcohol abuse. About 10% of the population in the United States has alcohol abuse issues. Marco was also a veteran, and everybody knows that veterans struggle with substance abuse issues in much greater numbers. But did you know that lawyers do as well? 10% of Americans are substance abusers, but among lawyers, it's double. And it's even worse for law students. One study estimated that over 30% of law students have a drinking problem. Why? Truth is, I don't think it matters for this story. For today, we just need to accept it as a fact. A fact that Marco Martinez probably didn't know. And let's face it, even if he had, he might not have appreciated it. But putting those two worlds together, recently leaving the elite military service and recently starting law school, well, that was a bad decision for Marco. Losing the military life he loved and diving into law school's pressure cooker seems to have stretched him to the limit. And the trauma, the loneliness, and the relentless demands seem to have gotten to him because soon after he left the Army, Marco started drinking. And by April of 2017, the honeymoon with his new girlfriend Sue Hayes, well, that was over. Marco's problems started out with what seems like paranoia. Marco believed that Sue was talking to other men, and that incensed the former soldier. He sent frightening emails to Sue constantly, threatening to shoot the guys she'd been talking to and saying that he was going to kill them. Sue must have told her family what was going on, and it seems that her brothers entered the chat. Marco, however, wasn't having any of it. He told Sue, quote, "I will fucking kill your brother if he tries to talk to me again, bitch." Marco all but dared them to try and step toward him. He wrote to Sue that if her brothers tried to approach him, they'd be playing right into his hands. He said, "I will kill motherfuckers. I'm serious." And Marco didn't seem to care that that sort of confrontation could cause him harm as well. He taunted Sue and her family. In one email, he said, "If you're going to send anyone, send one of the guys you've been talking to, so at least I can get 1 or 2 good kills before I get blasted. Because I'm waiting. Go ahead, send someone. I need someone to come through that door." The hostility escalated and went on for 2.5 years. It's tough to know how much of Marco's ramblings were done sober and how much were motivated by liquid courage, but one thing is clear. The drinking escalated, and it caught up to him in June of 2019. Experts on alcohol abuse rely on certain markers to determine when a drinker goes from drinking because they want to drink to drinking because they have to drink. It's after certain things happen that experts believe drinkers go from alcohol use to alcohol dependency. And one of those markers is when someone has legal problems. In June of 2019, Marco Martinez hit that marker. He was arrested for driving while intoxicated. Maybe it was a late-night drive. Maybe it was a moment of weakness fueled by the alcohol he leaned on to quiet his combat scars and deal with the pressure of law school. Maybe he was heading home after watching a baseball game at a bar. There's no information available. We don't know what caught the cop's eye, whether it was a swerve, a missed signal, whatever. But Marco indeed got a DUI, and the timing could not have been worse. Marco was nearing the end of law school. In a few short months, he'd have to fill out his application for the bar and start looking for a job. Of course, Marco already knew where he wanted to work, and the decision probably wouldn't be a surprise to anyone. Marco wanted to go back to the military. Marco planned on working with the Judge Advocate General's office in the Army. Being a JAG officer was a perfect fit for a guy who spent years in the military as an elite soldier and already had a top-secret clearance. The problem was, both the bar and the JAG Corps would be asking questions. In addition to the normal type of background checks that you'd expect for a job with the Judge Advocate General, Marco would have to also undergo the character and fitness review process for the Bar Association. See, when you become a lawyer, passing the bar exam isn't enough. You've got to prove that you're worthy of the title, that you've got the proper moral makeup to be a lawyer. After all, you're going to be entrusted with client funds and you're going to be making representation to the courts, so they want to ensure that candidates have the proper character and fitness for the job. That's where the character and fitness application comes in. It's a deep dive into your past. Every arrest, every conviction, every speeding ticket, how much debt you have, everything needs to be disclosed. Go talk to a lawyer you know and ask them how they felt about the character and fitness application process. The majority will tell you that it scared the heck out of them, even if they had no issues they needed to disclose. State bar associations want to know if you're honest. They want to know if you can be trusted. And for a potential JAG officer like Marco, the Army doubles down. They demand that same transparency during their application process because they need to ensure that lawyers are also beyond reproach. Marco's application to both must have looked stellar. Think about it. He's a combat veteran ranger who went on to become a paratrooper. He earned one of the highest security clearances in the military, and now he was adding a law degree. Looks pretty good. But that DUI would ruin everything. The DUI itself probably wouldn't have automatically slammed the door shut. A single DUI, even a first offense, isn't a deal breaker in itself. But it's a red flag. And the fact that it was so recent, it occurred while Marco was in law school, the fact that it was so recent makes it the reddest of red flags. And what happens when a character and fitness committee sees a red flag? They want to talk to you about it. There's no question that the character and fitness committee would want to ask Marco about the circumstances around that DUI. And that means he'd have to explain it. Maybe submit court records, proof of fines paid, or a letter admitting his mistake. The bar might have asked for a hearing to try to dig into whether he was addressing his alcohol use. And for the Army's JAG Corps, well, it might be a little bit stricter. They'd scrutinize that DUI too, but they'd look at it from the point of view of Marco's top secret security clearance. As a JAG officer with a high security clearance, Marco would have the ability to get a lot of delicate information, so they'd want to know if Marco was still worthy of that top secret designation. Now, in these kinds of situations, honesty goes a long way. If he'd lay it all bare and own the mistake, maybe even show that he'd sought counseling for the stress of leaving active duty, well then chances are that he'd be approved. But Marco must have known that in his case it wasn't that simple. He surely knew what would happen. When the bar and the JAG Corps started asking questions about his drinking, he knew that would lead them to Sue Hayes. And once they started talking to Sue, they'd see all of those emails and all of the threats and all of the wild behavior, and the red flag would turn into a black flag. So, Marco made that other bad decision. He lied. Marco left the DUI off of his application to the JAG Corps, and it seems that he also left it off his character and fitness application to the bar. And it worked. Marco passed the bar. He was successful in the character and fitness application, and he got that job at the JAG Corps. But unfortunately, not much else had changed. Marco was still angry. In fact, things got worse. Marco's anger graduated from verbal threats to physical violence. In early 2020, Marco showed up at Sue's house and got into a fight, a physical one. This time, Sue had apparently had enough. She called the cops and filed for a restraining order. Marco was incensed. He asked Sue, "What is it you're afraid of? What do you think's going to happen?" And Sue told Marco the obvious. "I'm afraid you're going to kill me." Marco replied with an ominous statement. He said, quote, "A protection order is not going to help you if I decide when we get off the phone right now, that's it, I've had it with her. If I wanted to get in the car and come to you and do something, a protection order would not do jack shit. If I wanted to kill you, I'd figure out when you're going to be home and I would come and kill you. Shortly after that call, Sue went to the police and recanted her report about the alleged fight at her house with Marco and dropped the request for a restraining order. Marco took the bar in 2020 and passed. He got the job at the JAG Corps, and later that year he started the entry-level JAG program at the Judge Advocate General Legal Center and School located on the grounds of the University of Virginia in Charlottesville. And that is where he met Wanda Brooks. At first, Marco's interactions with Wanda Brooks were professional. They were colleagues at the JAG school. But eventually, things got intimate. Sue Hayes probably would not have been happy if she knew about that, but there's no evidence that she knew. It sure seems like Marco was seeing both women at the same time. By the end of 2020, Marco Martinez's life was a pressure cooker. He was balancing a whole lot of things on the head of a pin. He had 2 romantic relationships, and his new girlfriend, Wanda, was recently transferred to another base out of state. So not only was he juggling 2 relationships, they were both long-distance relationships. On top of that, he was in training at the JAG school, and he was apparently continuing to deal with drinking issues. Something was bound to fall. He didn't expect that it wouldn't be something. It would be everything. First, Sue broke up with him. Why? Did she find out about Wanda? Or was she just sick and tired of being the object of Marco's abuse? Had she had enough of his drinking? Or maybe it was all of that. Maybe she finally found the courage to end it because Marco was now far away in Charlottesville. Marco must have been angry. So what if he had a relationship with Wanda going on? Who the hell was Sue to dump him? The audacity of Sue to pull out of their relationship probably tugged at Marco's psyche. Marco was angry, but he might have been able to get over it. Just as long as he wasn't pushed further. Just as long as nothing else popped up to piss him off. Like a bad decision from his not-so-distant past. As Marco went about his business, seething quietly from Sue's betrayal, he didn't know that forces were working behind his back. If he knew what was going on, he'd have flipped. He absolutely would have gone nuts if he learned that the JAG Corps was looking into his background. Because they were. No one knows how it started. It was probably because a JAG officer with a top-secret SCI clearance was subject to periodic reinvestigations. The Defense Counterintelligence and Security Agency periodically looked into individuals with security clearances to make sure that they're still worthy of having those clearances. In doing so, they look into civilian court records, financial history, that sort of stuff. And if they were, in fact, recertifying Marco's clearance, they would have also looked into criminal and traffic records, the place where they might find a previously undisclosed DUI offense. Marco's second bad decision had come home to roost. The JAG Corps found out that Marco left the DUI off of his application, and they were going to kick him out of the Army. In December of 2020, Marco was told to sit tight at Charlottesville and just wait. Marco, they said, was being removed from active duty, and he was simply to wait in Charlottesville until his formal separation from the Army came through. Marco Martinez was holding on by a very thin emotional thread. That single thread was holding together Marco Martinez's entire psyche. And when his second girlfriend Wanda tried to break up with him, the thread snapped. Marco was not about to allow Wanda to betray him as well. He called her and told her that he was getting in his car and driving across state lines to her house. She begged him not to do so, but Marco didn't listen. When Marco got to Wanda's house, the couple argued. He was inconsolable. His emotions must have been on a roller coaster the past few months. Sue left him, the Army left him, and now Wanda was leaving him. It was too much to bear. Marco pulled out a gun and threatened to kill himself. The conversation had to be intense. "I'm going to kill myself right here next to you, Wanda." She was terrified. She didn't believe Marco would just kill himself. She thought for sure he'd kill her first, then shoot himself. "Put the gun down, Marco. Just put it down and let's talk about this." "To hell with that," Marco probably replied. "Fuck this. This is it." "Please, Marco," she must have begged. "Go put the gun in the garage. Let's just talk about this." After pleading more with him, Wanda finally got him to put down the gun. He put it in the garage, and when he did that, Wanda took off. Wanda knew she couldn't trust Marco. She was sure he'd grab that gun again, and Wanda knew that if that happened, she'd be helpless to stop the hardened soldier. And she was also convinced that he'd end up using it on both of them, so she took off. Wanda fled and left Marco at her house. She texted him from the road and demanded that he leave her house. Marco refused. She said, "I'm not coming back until you're gone," but Marco was not about to leave so soon. Wanda was trying to hurt him, so now it was time to hurt her. She wasn't around, so Marco thought, let's see, how could I hurt someone who isn't around? Maybe I can hurt something she cares about. Marco went into the bathroom and rummaged through Wanda's medicine cabinet. He grabbed a vial, shook it, saw that there were pills in there, and he took it into the kitchen. Marco dumped the pills out, crushed them up, and looked around the room. He thought, now, where is that cat? There's no better way to hurt someone than to hurt their pet. Marco took the crushed pills, mixed them with the cat's food, and left the apartment. I'm telling myself that the cat survived. I don't know if it did. I know Marco tried to poison it, and I know he left, but for me to get through the day, I need to believe that that cat survived, so that's what we're going to believe. I looked, I couldn't find any information, so the cat survived. But I don't know. What I do know is that Marco continued to torment Wanda. Later, he texted a series of numbers and letters to Wanda. When Wanda saw them, she surely turned white. Marco texted her the passwords she used to access all of her accounts, including the security gate to her apartment and her license plate number of her car. And then he warned her, I remember all things. I like numbers. Wanda wasn't the only one being tortured by Marco Martinez. Marco was still reaching out to Sue Hayes periodically as well. Most recently, he called and accused Sue's father of causing Marco's problems. He threatened, I'm coming after him, and then you. Marco's anger had completely consumed him. His entire life was in the toilet. And whose fault was it? Was it Sue's or Wanda's? No, the more he thought about it, the more he realized who really fucked him. It was the army. The fucking army. They're kicking me out for what? A DUI? It was then that Marco made up his mind. It was time to hurt the army. He tried to hurt Wanda because she deserved it. He tried to destroy her cat. And now it was time to hurt the army. It was time to destroy something important to them. Marco sat at his desk one evening and turned on his computer. While it was booting up, he set up his phone on a tripod. He adjusted the screen so he'd be seen clearly. He needed to make sure that he got this all on camera. And then he hit record. Marco then used his top-secret clearance to access the JAG computer network, and he logged in while he spoke to the camera. He rambled. This is kind of funny. I don't even know how to explain this. You fuck me, and I'm going to fuck you. It's like, this is kind of funny. He spoke unintelligibly at times. Was he drunk? It was tough to say. He said things like, this is my bitch. I own you all. Marco scrolled through the files on the JAG computer. As he looked through the file names, his anger increased. He spoke to the camera. I don't understand why you guys don't understand this. Like, I own you. You are my little fucking cunts. Like, I made this. This is my bread and butter. And then you guys decide you're going to throw me to the wayside? Yeah, no, I don't think so. Marco found the file he was looking for. It was the JAG School's National Security Law Primer, a training course used in the JAG Corps known by its acronym as NSLP. It actually seems like Marco may have had a hand in creating it. It took the JAG 10 months to put it together, and it was a vital part of educating the incoming JAG officers about the law regarding national security. Marco knew how important this training course was to the JAG Corps. He continued rambling into the camera. I think I'm going to continue to own every single bit of you. You people thought you could fuck me? You thought you could easily remove me? You're not going to take my knowledge and use it against me." Marco knew how much that training course meant to the JAG Corps. He knew it was something the Army cared about, so he deleted it. Marco deleted the entire course off of the server. And then he looked at the camera and barked, "There you go. You have nothing, you fucking cunt." Marco knew he had just caused some serious damage to the Army, but it seems like he wasn't quite satisfied. Marco wasn't just angry, he felt betrayed, and just sabotaging the Army was not going to be enough. He had to go further. Marco had already spent the entire night on the computer, and it was now just past midnight when he figured out how he could take his revenge to the next level. He picked up the phone and dialed a number. Marco then spent the next few moments talking to whomever answered the phone at the Russian embassy in Washington, D.C. What did Marco say? Was he trying to sell secrets? Did he tell the person who answered the phone that he had a top-secret clearance? He must have said something intriguing because he kept the person on the phone for 2 minutes and 26 seconds. That's far more than just calling and hanging up. The Russian embassy is staffed by intelligence officers at every level, including people who pick up the phone at 12:30 in the morning. He could have given critical national security information to that person. On the other hand, it could have been 2 minutes and 26 seconds of a drunk, angry person rambling into a phone receiver. There's no record of the content of the call, but there is a record of Marco bragging about it, because right after making the call, he called Wanda and admitted everything that he had done. He said, "I'm tearing down all of the NSLP. I'm teaching them a lesson. Actions have consequences. I'm going to bring their house down on them. They have no idea what I can do to them. Your people want to betray me? It's done. There's no more NSLP. Do you see the power I have? Do you see the power I have? I own everything. I control it all. I say jump, you say how high. You people have fucked me on one too many times. You try to use my knowledge again? Yeah, I deleted it all. I deleted it all. You should probably tell your people not to fuck with me because I just single-handedly brought an entire system down." And then he said, "Oh yeah, Russia has reached out to me." And he told Wanda that he planned to leave for Russia the next day. Marco Martinez did not leave for Russia the next day, but it's clear his antics were not just the late-night ranting of a drunk mind, because several days after he deleted the files, he texted Wanda again and said, quote, "The Russians in D.C. reached out to me. They'd like to know what I know." 2 weeks later, Marco Martinez was formally discharged from the Army. And when that happened, he broke. His psyche was shattered, and he took it out on Wanda. He called Wanda over and over, leaving threatening voice messages when she refused to answer the phone. He sent her scary texts containing photos of assault rifles. Marco's mental state deteriorated, and that simply had to be accelerated by all the drinking. He continued to threaten both Wanda and her family. Wanda told him to stop contacting her, but he wouldn't relent. She tried to block him on her cell phone and social media, but he kept pursuing her. And as time went on, the pursuit became more extreme. More extreme and mean. Marco broke into the account Wanda used to track and record the dates of her period. The fertility tracker account showed that Wanda had recently had sex with someone and that she had a negative pregnancy test. Marco sent her an email with a screenshot of that result, along with a message that said, "Sorry to see you're still a failure." I've spent many years prosecuting lawyers in the attorney disciplinary system. I'd like to think that over the course of my career, I've seen everything. Stealing money from your trust account? Oh yeah, I've seen it. Missing deadlines and screwing up a client's ability to sue? Seen that too. But there are two things that I see most often. The first might surprise you. You have no idea how many lawyers are having sex with their clients. It's an epidemic. A sexpidemic. It happens so often that I am convinced that if lawyers just stopped doing that one thing, there wouldn't be enough work to keep me employed. Luckily for me, there's no chance that's going to happen. Actually, I really don't want them to stop. As long as lawyers keep sleeping with their clients, my job is safe. So when lawyers sleep with their clients, I benefit, and let's face it, that's what we should all be focused on, right? It's all about me. So lawyers, keep on trucking. When it comes to sleeping with your clients, think about me. You know what I mean. The other thing I see very often is far less sexy, but probably more common, and that is lawyers who lie. They get caught in a lie, and they get in trouble. Now, there's an interesting phenomenon I noticed in the grievance system. Lawyers who get caught lying sometimes deal with that lie differently. And it comes down to whether the lawyer who is facing the disciplinary charges hires a lawyer to represent them or they choose to represent themselves. Lawyers who hire other lawyers to represent them fall on their sword. Every time. They admit what they've done, they beg for mercy, they ask for forgiveness, they show remorse. They still get in trouble, but they slather on all of the mitigating factors, and in the end, it hurts less. Lawyers who represent themselves, when they're caught lying, they all do the same thing. They double down, baby. They never admit what they did. They lean into that lie so hard that they're almost horizontal. Marco Martinez may never have actually practiced law even for a day. I mean, he was kicked out when he was still in the JAG school, so he probably never actually used the degree he paid for. But even though he never actually lawyered, he inherited the approach of many of his legal brethren. And he proved that when the FBI came knocking on his door. The absence of that critical training module set off alarm bells at the JAG Corps, and the Feds started to investigate immediately. The trail, of course, eventually led to Marco Martinez. And when they realized that Marco, a person with such a high security clearance, was a person of interest, and when they found evidence about what he appeared to have done, well, they became quite concerned. They didn't know what Marco said to that Russian embassy official, but they didn't consider a 2.5-minute conversation to be inconsequential. That was plenty of time to convey critical information, and they knew that Marco had access to stuff the Russians would want. Through his work as a ranger, he acquired knowledge of classified special ops missions that occurred during his deployments in Afghanistan. He also had details about intelligence collecting capabilities and tactics, techniques, and procedures of the 75th Ranger Regiment. And he was apparently bragging about going to Russia? Was that true or just boasting? Well, that's what they needed to find out. When the FBI got Marco into the room, he surely sat up straight, displaying the stiff discipline of a trained soldier. It's likely that he instinctively reverted to his training in special ops and maintained his composure. And when the FBI asked him about all of the stuff they heard about, Marco Martinez looked them straight in the eye and lied. They showed him the out-processing form he filled out when he was formally discharged from the Army. In the section entitled Foreign Contact Debriefing, the form asks, "Have you had any contact with a foreign national while assigned to the JAG school?" Martinez marked no in the response. The next section of the form says, "I acknowledge that this is a crime to knowingly make any material, false, fictitious, or fraudulent statement." They reminded him that he had signed and dated that section of the form. But when the Feds pressed him, Marco stuck to his story. He told the FBI that he never initiated contact with a representative of the Russian government for any reason. Even when they showed him the phone records, he doubled down. "I never made that call," he told them. When they showed him the JAG training course was deleted, he doubled down again. Martinez said he had no idea how it happened. He said he learned that it was deleted after hearing it from a coworker. Not only did Marco lie, but he tried to get other people to lie too. Marco heard that the FBI was going to be interviewing Sue Hayes, and he knew he had to do something about that. Marco forced Sue to visit him at his Charlottesville apartment. He needed to prepare her for the interview. When she got there, Marco's paranoia seemed to be at its height. Before they talked, he insisted that they leave their cell phones and Apple Watches in a separate room to avoid being monitored. And then they went outside. Marco wouldn't talk about the matter until they were at a nearby outside mall. I envisioned them strolling around like those undercover videos you see of mob bosses when they're talking. They spent hours out there, all the while Marco was coaching Sue on what she should say at the FBI interview. They discussed how to match their stories about everything, about the statements she made in the past when she brought charges against him, about how she could explain the reason she recanted. Marco told Sue about what he had recently said to investigators, and they made sure that she knew what to say to back up all of his lies. When they finished, Marco developed a system of code words that they could use to communicate how the interview went without raising the suspicion of the feds. If things went well, Sue was supposed to use the word sriracha when she spoke to Marco. If things did not go well, she was supposed to work in the phrase melons in the garden. After the interview, Sue must have used their secret code. At some point, she must have said that she had to get home. It was time for her to pick those melons in the garden. It was a warm summer day in August, and Marco Martinez was hot under the collar. It wasn't just the height of the mercury that was making him sweat, it was the FBI. The investigation was not going his way, and Marco knew that it was just a matter of time until someone came knocking on his door. So he decided to go knocking on someone else's door first. The trip from Charlottesville, Virginia to Boone County, Arkansas takes about 16 hours. That meant that Marco Martinez had a long ride ahead of him. And that was fine because he had a lot of thinking to do. He was thinking about how he'd deal with Sue Hayes when he got to her home in Arkansas. Marco pulled into the driveway and proceeded up the walk to Sue's small home. Her dogs must have started barking as soon as they sensed him outside. He banged on the door. There's a good chance he was drunk. He could have topped off at a local bar, or who knows, he might have made the whole trek from Virginia wasted. When Sue opened the door and saw Marco, she must have been instantly terrified. There was fury in his eyes. Marco burst through the front door, rattling the Christmas wreath that was still hanging on the door. Marco paced around the room as he rambled. He circled the island in the kitchen, then marched through the family room, doing laps through the main living area of the small home. The dogs in the background were surely yapping. Marco screamed at Sue. There's no way to know exactly what he said. There's security camera footage, but it's only video, and even that is blurry. Marco's intensity grew. His anger bubbled. He must have thought this all started with a bad decision. A bad decision where I lied about a DUI. A lie about a DUI that caused my entire life to unravel. A lie that eventually found him pacing through a small home in Arkansas with a gun tucked into his pants. Sue watched helplessly as the anger in Marco grew. Marco eventually stopped his pacing and confronted Sue at the entrance to her bedroom. He stood 2 feet away from her. If he was drunk, she could surely smell the alcohol on his breath. If he was yelling, she'd feel the droplets of spit spraying on her face. But none of that would bother her because she would have been preoccupied with the fact that a gun was now pointed at her head. Marco Martinez stood in Sue Hayes' house, holding the barrel of his handgun against her forehead. He was leaning forward with one foot in front of the other, pressing the gun aggressively against her brow. Sue braced herself. She knew what was coming next. She leaned slightly forward, closer to the gun. Maybe being closer to the barrel might make it all end quicker. She placed her hand over her mouth, anticipating the blow that was going to come from Marco's weapon. Marco Martinez then revealed that he was indeed a trained killer. But he wasn't a cold-blooded killer. He vanished from the house, leaving Sue and her dogs shaking in the living room of their home. I have to apologize to you for the second time today because the end of the story is frustrating. After Marco left Sue's house, she called the cops and he was, of course, arrested. Martinez was charged with cyber-stalking, witness intimidation, domestic violence, and a series of federal crimes related to his calls to the Russian embassy. But this appears to be one of those cases where justice, well, it was served, but we don't really feel so good about it. Marco Martinez pled guilty to federal charges involving the destruction of military property and lying to federal investigators. All of the cyber-stalking charges and the domestic violence, that was all dismissed as part of his plea deal. He only got 4 years in prison. He's currently in jail in the federal system. Well, I hope you enjoyed that program, everyone. Thank you very much for listening. The next program that's going to come out, I'm expecting it to come out next week on the 30th. I'm trying to get out a quick program so that I can go back to my 1st of the month and 15th of the month schedule. I'm not sure, but I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Thank you very much for listening. Please don't forget to go to your podcast platform of choice and like us, rate us, give us a review, that sort of thing. I hope you enjoyed the program, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day.